Awesome. So Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today and talking a little bit about your experience with the Hope Scholarship and how that worked for your family. So could you tell me a little bit about your family? How many kids do you have and how old are they? What is their education experience right now?
Sure. So I'm glad I could be here today with you and help answer some questions for some parents out there. So we actually are in a unique situation here in Florida because we just moved from Colorado to Florida back in August, the week that school was starting here for the public schools. And one of the biggest reasons we chose Florida was because we knew from living in Colorado, where our state is shut down, that we wanted to be able to put our kids back into the public school system and back into an in-person education. And we knew that that wasn't an option for us in Colorado. And so that was one of our biggest motivating factors to, kind of hurry up, sell our house and get here so that we could actually get our kids back into a good education system, as well as that social aspect that they've been missing so much. So we have our oldest daughter, my husband and I, Brian, and we have our oldest daughter, Ellison. She's in 9th grade, so she was going to be a freshman this year. And then we have our middle child, Carrington, is in the 5th grade. And then our youngest son, Britton, is in 2nd grade. And so far, before we moved here, we were in a charter school. We've always been in a charter school. We had school choice in Colorado, so we could live anywhere and we could send our kids to any school that we chose. And we were very, very fortunate. We didn't realize how fortunate we were until we got here. We kind of just thought, oh, it's like this everywhere, naively. And so we had been able to our school was across the street from our house, but we knew all about it. It wasn't our zoned school, but we had the choice to send our kiddos there. And so we felt really fortunate that so far for our kids' education, we've been able to send them wherever we wanted them to go. They've always been in a great learning environment. It's always been the public school system. It was just in the form of a charter school versus traditional public school.
Wow. Okay. And so when you came back over here to Naples, were they in a charter school as well over here?
Actually, so we're in Manatee County, and our kids ended up going to the local public school. We felt like we just had moved. We kind of wanted to get involved in the community, the local community right near us. We wanted to be able to meet neighborhood friends and neighborhood families and people that lived close by. So we all talked as a family and decided we think the best thing would be to go to the local public school, which was like 4 blocks away for the 2 youngest children. And then our oldest daughter was really, really excited to get to go to the high school that's real close by our house as well, so that she could meet friends that were hopefully, maybe would live down the street and they could walk to school together and really plug into our community right close by.
Yeah. Well, how long were your kids enrolled in the public school system in Florida before things started happening that led you to pull them out?
I would say, I know there's a lot of strangeness going on with COVID. We were trying to give it a little grace and a little bit of time. We enrolled them. They started August 17th. So they started the first day of school. All of them started school. And I would say my oldest stuck it through the whole first quarter. She was in the hybrid option, which was an accidental thing. They had accidentally put her in the hybrid option, which was she got to go to school just on Thursday and Friday in person. But Monday through Wednesday, she was doing online school. And so she actually did that throughout the entire first quarter. And our middle child is actually still in the public school. So she's still in the same school that she started in because she is absolutely thriving and loving it there. And it's been a great experience for her. She had a great teacher. She's met some great little friends. And so she's still there. And then our son was at that same school that she's currently at. And he lasted for about, I would say, a month. I think he was there about a month, and we just started having some issues that were things that weren't going to be conducive to him being able to learn and stay at that school with that same teacher and in that location.
Can you tell me about some of those issues that you had?
Yeah, so they weren't bullying in the traditional sense of what we think of bullying. They were things like, so for our daughter being in 9th grade, she was a freshman. She was brand new at school in a school of 3,600 students as a brand new high schooler and a brand new person in town. So she knew no one. And when she went to school the first day, she just had encountered there weren't people that she knew. No one was around to give any kind of tour. They didn't do any kind of freshman or high school orientation of any kind, not even a virtual learning, which is what we were told that they would do. Things we didn't have a lot of knowledge about where she should go, what she should do, where the cafeteria was, where the bathrooms were. Like, she went in very nervous and kind of really a lot of trepidation about what this year was going to be, because she had in her mind this amazing high school experience. And then the first day of school, you know, she's timidly walking around. She's a very kind, sweet girl, but she's a little bit shy. And so spending her lunches alone, and, you know, several times was approached by senior classmen who were offering her drugs and trying to they were saying, oh, you look really lonely, you should come hang out with us, that kind of a thing, and trying to like rope her in to that environment. And, you know, she's a smart girl, so she said no thanks. But she said every day she was having trouble sleeping at night the days before she would go to school on Thursday and Friday, because she was worried that she would have to deal with these kids that were, you know, just coming around kind of harassing her and bothering her. And she just didn't know really how to handle it. We tried to talk through some of that, but it didn't change the fact that every night she was struggling sleeping. She wasn't sleeping, like she'd be awake most of the night, just kind of worried about going to school the next day. So we had talked to the principal at that school we had emailed him about her just going to the hybrid option, or to the full online e-learning option. So instead of her having to come to school on Thursdays and Fridays, I let him know that she had been approached with some kids, and that wasn't letting her feel very comfortable to go to school. And, you know, as soon as the quarter was over, we wanted to make sure we switched into the full e-learning. And he let us know that that was not an option for us. The school had not made a decision about what they were going to do at the end of the quarter. They were now, end of quarter was coming up the middle of October, and they were telling everyone that they had to stay in the program that they were put in, so she would have to stay in hybrid until the middle of November, when they figured out what they were going to do. And so that wasn't an option for us. I wasn't going to keep sending her to school, having her awake with, you know, tummy issues every night, getting nervous about going to school. So I had told her, no, we'll just call out sick every day for a month, until, you know, just for those days until the quarter ends. She's a straight A student, so we knew it wouldn't be a problem. She could easily, you know, make up the work and do all that. So I reached out to the principal and I said, hey, this is the struggle we're having. We're going to just go ahead and keep her home, and we will unofficially be doing e-learning, and we'll just have to call her out sick. And he said, sorry, that's not an option either, because she'll be considered truant. And so she has to come to school. Her teachers may not accept her absence. Then she'll be failing school. And that was kind of the last straw for me. I was like, no, that's not really an option. My straight A student, who is really a dream student, honestly, is not going to be considered truant because she's having issues with some kids on campus, when there's an e-learning option fully available that was supposed to become available at the very end of that quarter, and the school dropped the ball and didn't figure out what they were doing. So I felt like it was, you know, they could have made an exception. They could have figured something out, surely, to allow her to stay home, and they just weren't willing to do it. But I wasn't willing to send her back into that environment. As for my son, in second grade, he had some issues where he's always been like the teacher pet, the teacher favorite. He's always been the little helper that, you know, kids all love playing with him. Ever since, you know, he started going to school, that's kind of been his thing. He loves to go to school. It's always really fun. He gets up, he is motivated to get out and go. And he was coming home very stressed out about the work, stressed out about masks in school, having a hard time hearing. He felt like the teacher didn't really like him because he was having a hard time focusing in the afternoons. And so he came home from school 4 days in a row. As soon as he would get in the car, he was like, Mom, I have to pee so bad. I have to pee so bad. And I'm like, buddy, why didn't you just go at school? Tomorrow, just go at school. Don't let this happen again. So he kept coming home, and I kept thinking, why is he not going to the bathroom at school? This is crazy. We're jumping in the car. Thankfully, we live close. We're racing home so he can go to the bathroom. And so the fourth day, I said, Bud, you can't keep doing this. You have to go to the bathroom at school. We can't keep racing home every day. If we have to run an errand, there's no way. And my middle daughter spoke up and said, Mom, we're only allowed to go to the bathroom twice a day because of COVID. So he's probably right. He's not allowed to go to the bathroom. And I said, that's insane that a second grader can't go to the bathroom. And he said, no, Mom, I'm going to get in trouble. My teacher doesn't like me, and I'm going to get in trouble. If I go to the bathroom more than twice, or if I ask to go to the bathroom, I get in trouble. That same afternoon, he came home, he unloaded his backpack, and there was a note from the teacher with a stack of papers saying that there's a test tomorrow in geometry, and your son, there was a note, your son has not focused in class all week. He's behind. You need to do all of this work with him, bring it back tomorrow, and I need to let you know there's a test on all of the information as well. And that was kind of our final straw. We're like, no, this is not okay. Like, we had spoken to her a couple times about other things. And we just decided it wasn't a good environment for him to be in. He was fearful to go to school. He started, had been crying for about a week at night. Same thing, Mom, I just don't want to go to school today. It became a battle every morning that he didn't want to go. And there was no, even if we switched classes, I knew at the point that we were at, if we switched classes, we switched teachers, they came up with a solution. He didn't want to go to that school. And that was the problem. It wasn't because it wasn't specifically, it was the teacher and it was the environment, but I think he already had such a bad taste about going to school and so much fear about going to that school in particular that he wouldn't have had it even if they had given us a solution.
Wow. So that's gotta be so stressful too, just thinking about all the little kids that are in school told you can't go to the bathroom more than twice a day. And I mean, I feel when I have the mask on, and I don't know if they're wearing the shields, but you can't hear anything, your balance is off, and to be a child and experiencing that has to be overwhelming. So what did you do then? How did the process go? Especially right now, I think a lot of parents are having problems with the school systems, but there's just so much chaos and so much change with COVID restrictions and guidelines. How did you then make a switch to another school or find other options?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's a lot going on with COVID, and it leaves parents feeling kind of like, what do I do? Especially for parents that work. I'm fortunate and I get to work from home at the moment, and so does my husband. So we just said, well, I guess we're just going to pull them. We don't really know what we're going to do with them, but we're going to take them out because that was what was best for them. And so I decided, my sister is doing a homeschool program with her son in Maine, and we just decided to join them in their homeschool program. And so we pulled them and we started doing a faith-based program because it really matched with what we wanted to teach our children. And so that's what we started to do. And they have been doing really well with it. And I would say the tricky part for us is that our oldest really wanted to have a high school experience. She wanted to get a real good high school education. She doesn't have a lot of confidence in mom teaching her at home, especially being, a straight A student and kind of an honors girl. And she really thrived at her previous schools. And so she misses having the friends and going to the band concerts and going to the sporting events and doing all of the fun social things. So school-wise, it's going fine. But I think there's so much more for our kids when it comes to going to a school than learning. Like, it's so much more than learning for kids all around. And so for us, we just made the choice to pull them directly out of school. We didn't know that the Hope Scholarship existed at that time. So we pulled them and we just started doing homeschool.
And how did you find out about the Hope Scholarship?
I got involved with the school board. I got involved with some moms that are conservative moms like I am, and they had brought up some things to my attention that were going on, things that were being voted on by the school board. And being new in town, I really didn't know a whole lot about the process. I've never been to a school board meeting in my life before this because I never needed to. Our previous schools just seemed to just run like a well-oiled machine and everything went great. And I don't even remember anything ever coming up that was alarming to the point where people actually attended the school board meetings. So it started out because I started getting involved with a group of moms that that were looking out not only for their children, but for the best interest of all children. And it started out as a group of moms that said, you know, our kids are in masks and we really want to fight this. And in Manatee County, there's on the 10th coming up, there's a big vote by the school board to decide whether or not they can just implement masks whenever they want to as a school board. So that I was very passionate as a nurse. I'm very passionate about our children not wearing masks at school. And so I got involved with them. And one of the girls just happened to mention, she said, you know, I don't know what your situation is, but there's this thing called the Hope Scholarship. And so I thought, well, I mean, I could look it up. I had never really thought about it. At this point, we've been home for a little while, but my older daughter was still kind of going, Mom, I think I'd like to go to school. I don't know, like it's such a weird time. So I had just gone online and looked up the Hope Scholarship, and the first thing that came up was Florida Citizens Alliance. And so I was able to read a little bit, and I thought, I don't really know why she recommended this to me. I know she's not sure why I pulled them, but I didn't really feel like I fit the parameters of having children that had been bullied at school, because I didn't think my kids had really, I mean, they hadn't been, even my ninth grader, I didn't feel like it was necessarily bullying, even though she was afraid to go back to school and didn't really want to deal with those kids and was having a hard time. It wasn't really bullying. No one beat her up. No one pushed her in a closet. No one, you know, physically harmed her. And so I kind of felt like, well, I don't really qualify for this. But instead of just giving up on it, I thought, well, maybe there's something that we qualify for. The other piece was financially. I knew that financially we probably wouldn't qualify for a scholarship. And so I thought, well, I'll just email this Florida Citizens Alliance and just ask them, maybe there's another scholarship available for my kids. Maybe there's something else they can tell me that might help me on this journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very common issue that we run into is we use the term bullying and people think student on student, somebody's beating up somebody else. You know, we talk about cyberbullying now too, but when the Hope Scholarship was created, and now that they've expanded the definition of bullying with threat, intimidation, harassment, and including teachers, including administrators, anybody on campus, it really is so applicable to any student. I know when I was in high school, I wasn't, you know, bullied by other students, but I was also, I went to a school here in Collier County. Kids walked around every day during lunch selling drugs in their, you know, lunch boxes. That I would say was a little bit intimidating or threatening, if I wanted to kind of put it that way. And then also, you know, the teachers and administrators kind of pushing a lot of different curriculum that was completely opposite of what my parents were teaching me at home or what our family believes in. I think that parents need to be able to kind of expand their understanding of what bullying is today, especially when we have so many radical ideas being pushed in the classroom. And then we also have just so much change with COVID and such a big controversy between those who completely 100% believe that everyone needs to wear a mask all the time and those who disagree with that. And so I think, you know, the Hope Scholarship really puts that power back in the parents' hands, which I think is great. And we're so happy that you did reach out to us to be able to talk about this, because you're right. When people think of bullying and then you think of the scholarship aspect of it, you might not have seen how this could be applicable to you. But I do think, you know, it's hard to go from such a large school or, you know, just the typical high school experience and then be all of a sudden homeschooled. And I was homeschooled for a little bit, and it was definitely a different experience. So I understand your daughter's, you know, her feelings. But so I guess, what is some advice from your experience with all of this that you would give to other parents who are kind of starting to take that step, starting to understand a little bit about the Hope Scholarship? What steps can they take to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, all I did really, Dominique, was just reach out to on the website you guys have at Florida Citizens Alliance. So I would say start there. Just reach out and send an email if, if you're not sure how the process works, because it does seem a little intimidating at first. There's a lot of, you read through all the fine print if you're like me, very detail oriented, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I qualify. I don't know if my circumstance is the right kind of circumstance. But I can tell you, after having been to the school board meeting this past week as well, we just here in Manatee County, and I'm sure across the state of Florida, there's all kinds of this stuff going on right now, but the most recent thing that our school board passed was an equity and equality and inclusion policy into our school system. And so what that has done, they will deny it, but what it has done based on if you read the verbiage of the policy, and so look at your school policies. If there are things happening in the school, in the classrooms, that that don't align with what you want to teach your children, you need to look at those policies, because for us, that policy now means that critical race theory, for example, can be introduced to our kids. We have our fifth grader who's still in school, against my better judgment, but as trying to be a mom that can let them, make their decisions and see how that goes for her and let it play out and let this be her decision if she decides to stay or whether she decides to come home. Something that has come up with her recently was sex education. So that's another big thing I would say, Dominique, is that there are a lot of things that would probably qualify under the Hope Scholarship that parents are not aware of. And she came home from school one day recently and said, hey mom, so I was in art class and we had a substitute, and it was the weirdest thing. It was really strange. I felt super uncomfortable because she started talking about sex education in my art class. And I said, well, that's really weird, that you're talking about sex education in art class. Where we came from in Colorado and all through my raising children so far, anytime sex education was going to be talked about in a classroom, we received a notice from the school, and we had an option. It wasn't necessarily to opt out. They didn't give your child another option that day at school to go do, but you could keep them home that day. They would say, hey, we're going to be doing this for all the fifth graders. If you'd rather teach that at home, yourself, and you don't want them to be exposed to this at school, you have the option of keeping your child home. So where I came from, that's what I was used to. I was used to having that respect and that authority as a parent. And so here I learned that that's not actually the case. And I got in touch with the principal about that issue. And she told me that it's part of the legislature for the state of Florida that children have to be it's basically to check on them, to make sure they're not being sexually abused at home. And while I totally understand that, I definitely wasn't happy that my child was exposed to what she felt like it was a very weird, very uncomfortable conversation from, it was actually the school counselor. It wasn't a substitute. It was a school counselor that was going into each art class that day and discussing this with children. So again, as a nurse, I get it. I understand that there's certain things for certain families and certain children that need to be conversations that are had. However, not every child needs to have those conversations. And I think that we could do a better job of that. So I just think as a parent, look at what your kids are learning, look at what your specific school is teaching them, look at the curriculum and look closely, because a lot of times there's things that are interwoven that we're not aware of. In Sarasota County recently, there's a big LGBTQ conversation where they were having like a month where they celebrated that. And so for parents that maybe felt like that was threatening to their children, those kinds of things qualify. And so there's a lot that qualifies. So if you are questioning anything at all, or you're just not happy at your school, contact, I would say, the Florida Citizens Alliance, fill out the form online. It was super easy, and they can tell you whether or not your situation qualifies.
I just completely agree with what you were saying about, there's so many different instances for different families that kind of is that point that crosses the line for what should be taught in public school and what should be taught at home and discussed at home. And I think, when it comes to the sex ed curriculum, you're right. Most people still think that that's what's going on, is kind of a class that you can opt in or you can take your child home. When I was young, my mom opted me out. I sat in the library and that was fine. That was her choice for me as a fifth grader. But now it's not like that anymore. It really is starting to become comprehensive, where they have it in every single classroom, where they stick it in here and there without informing the parents. And as far as the LGBTQ month, they wanted to have that in Lee County. It's in counties all over Florida that they're starting to introduce this. And our point as Florida Citizens Alliance was, hey, Florida ranks 45th out of the 50 states in ACT and SAT scores. Half of our kids can't read and write at grade level. So instead of spending money and resources and time pushing this LGBTQ celebration month, why don't we focus on helping our kids just learn to read and write, prepare them for college, because our kids aren't prepared for college. Really, to have a student go through the high school system in Florida and succeed, the parent has to be very involved, understand, dual enrollment, AP classes, things like that. But the typical high school student is being poorly neglected. I experienced that. I didn't even write a paper when I was in the public school system. It didn't happen. If you wrote a paper, it was for a district test, and you never got that back. You never had feedback. Just every single class, honestly, every single subject had its different issues, everything from science and harshly criticizing any kind of biblical worldview on creation to, English classes becoming very politicized as well. So I think you're right. Parents really need to focus on what's in the schools, look at the curriculum, and go to the school board meetings, because especially since distance learning, a lot of the equity and inclusion work, things like that, parents can finally kind of tap in and see what's going on. I know there are some districts that are asking parents to sign a waiver that they won't be involved at all or won't watch what's going on the computer due to privacy reasons. But I think if it's public school, you have absolutely a right as a parent to know exactly what's being taught. So definitely, I encourage anybody who's watching to go to the Florida Citizens Alliance website, goflca.com, and check out all the information that we have on the Hope Scholarship. So can you tell me a little bit, what does education look like for your family going forth? I guess it's kind of a gray question, or in a gray area, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, but I guess just from now, at least till the end of the school year, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we're still doing our homeschool program, and we've talked to a private school here, like right close by our house. It's actually a school that we had looked at, but we thought, well, we really want to be part of the community. That was our first priority, was get plugged into our community. We got plugged into a good church, and so we thought we'll just plug in at the public schools. And now we're realizing that wasn't a great option for us. So we've looked into the private Christian school here that's close by. And we're just kind of waiting for them to get back to us, let us know if they have availability for our kids. And of course, there's an interview process, and there's a whole process that you have to go through to get accepted at schools like private schools, especially. So we're just kind of in limbo. We're waiting, but we're going to continue doing our homeschool program. And then we're just waiting to see, can we start in January? And if they don't accept students in January, we're going to maybe hopefully push that out until the fall or whenever they start accepting students. I think that's kind of the normal enrollment process. So it is a little bit of a gray area for us. If they said tomorrow you could start, we would start tomorrow. So I know my 9th grader would anyway. But we're just kind of at the mercy of just whatever. Like you said, COVID's a weird thing. This is all kind of strange right now. With the homeschool stuff, and then hopefully we'll be able to get into a private school that's at least close by our house.
Yeah. I have a kind of a question going back to the curriculum. Has there been a point, most likely probably not for your son, but for your 2 daughters, that you've realized maybe some of the curriculum that they've been taught or materials that you've had discussions with at home? What are some of the things that you've seen them maybe exposed to that maybe set off some alarm bells for you?
Honestly, I'm glad you asked that question, because with my daughter, I think there's definitely a lot of political discussions happening in the classrooms. Some of it is coming from teachers expressing their personal viewpoints. And growing up, I don't know how it was for anybody watching this, but growing up, our teachers didn't really get political. They allowed us to really think about what, they asked us questions, and they got us thinking about what we believed. But I didn't ever feel like teachers pushed their belief system onto us. And I do feel like now there is a lot of liberal sort of discussion occurring in the classrooms, at least where we were at school. And then the other piece I would say for just comparing moving from one state that had honestly a great school system, that had school choice, that parents were very involved, that kind of thing. Even in the public school system, it was a very different ball game compared to Florida. I would say that the curriculum here is a little different. I'm noticing that my kids don't have a lot of work to come home with. And I know that for my 5th grader, there have been times she's not gone to school because she didn't feel well, or she was nervous about something going to school, just normal 5th grade stuff, I think, but where she maybe stayed home a couple of days and she didn't really miss any work. Like I would say, hey, where's your work? Because, you should have had at least a couple days. And at home in Colorado, we would have had to sit at the table for a couple of extra hours that week to make up the work. And there's just been no work to make up. I'm good, Mom. We don't have anything to make up. We just went over it in class. And so with her, I just feel like it's kind of strange to me that, not that I'm encouraging a ton of homework, it's just different. And I have noticed too that with my son, what they're teaching, like for math, wasn't something that we focused on in Colorado, because I think that out there they really focus on more practical skills. So like the practical sides of math, and also learning your foundations first and then building upon those foundations. And here I feel like it's very much it's to check a box and probably to take a standardized test. In Colorado, you could opt out of those standardized tests, and most parents did opt their children out of the standardized testing because we felt, and in our school in particular that we were at, really encouraged. The teachers didn't teach to the testing. The teachers taught to the children and to what they knew that they needed for skills to move on. And so here I feel like it's very much teaching to check the box and be able to test well, versus teaching the children so that they can grow and that they can move in the right direction in the future.
Yeah. I mean, they really started pushing the district tests or just the standardized tests back when I was a sophomore in high school. So it was like 2014 was when Common Core really came into Florida. And I started being pulled into computer labs on a weekly basis and taking these standardized tests, and teachers would talk about them in classrooms. And the amount of hours, I wish I had a number to put of the amount of hours that I wasted taking random tests that were not graded. They didn't even reflect my academics. It really was just kind of, we were a guinea pig class for a lot of the Common Core to take off. And now Common Core has been discontinued. So it's, all of that time has been wasted, and now we're trying to obviously change the standards. But another aspect of that I saw, I didn't have a lot of homework either. And a lot of that was because we weren't allowed to take our textbooks home. So and I'm not sure how it varies from county to county, but in Collier County, they said, look, we don't want you to have to worry about carrying so many textbooks, which the textbooks were extremely political. I mean, just this is how America is oppressive to this group, this group, this group. I mean, almost starting to teach kind of critical race theory and things like that when I was in high school. And we weren't allowed to take them home. And then eventually everything became, we all got our own laptop that you kept at school. So all of your data, all of your homework is at school. And so I think that it just is another huge barrier that is preventing parents from knowing what's going on, seeing the work that's being done. And I think that why I'm passionate about education is because I felt so uneducated, I guess, or felt really unprepared for college. And it took me a good 2 years in college to really work so hard and be able to write better and read better and think about things in a more critical way than just sitting there being told, this is the material, we're going to go over it, here's some questions, and then never really, you're just not learning. And these kids, this is the prime time for their brain to be developing. And I think I know the Florida schools are doing a very poor job of preparing children for that higher education. So we're just so thankful for parents like you who are interested and invested in their child's education, and who are willing to actually make a change in that. When I know it's so hard to pull your kid out especially when you have 3 of them and they're all in different situations. It really is difficult as a parent. Like you said, thankfully you work from home and so does your husband. So that helps. And I think a lot of parents have that opportunity right now to kind of just sit down, look at the curriculum and rethink your child's education, because it is so important. You know, at the end of the day, a lot of people will tell me, well, my kid got good scholarships and they, you know, learned how to read and write in the Florida public schools and now they're off at college. And I just think, well, just wait until they're 27 years old or something and they come home and they're completely intolerant of your ideas, your old school ideas, and they have completely been radicalized by not only higher education that has, you know, really hammered it in, but it was all, you know, the seeds were planted in K through 12 education, and parents just aren't aware that that's going on right now. So thank you for, you know, paying attention and doing something and taking advantage of the Hope Scholarship.
Thank you, Dominique.
Is there any other advice that you would give parents? Kind of just a few last words.
I would just say, I think we know our kids best. And I think that a lot of times the public school system, at least what I've experienced going to my first school board meeting last week, they think that they are here to parent our children, and they're not here to parent our children. God put us in charge of that. And it's a very big responsibility. And we know them best. So don't let the public school system parent your children. Do it yourself.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you so much. I am probably just gonna like cut the recording there.
Really good.
Thank you a lot for just your advice and sharing your story, because I mean, education is such a big subject that people are scared almost to take on, because it's everything, like you said, from, you know, the curriculum they're being taught to just the teachers being extremely harsh on students right now. And it's really difficult for us to even get those stories of just everyday, almost, you know, teacher to student bullying of, you know, if your second grader is sitting in a classroom and really feels like my teacher doesn't like me, something's going on there. You know, normally it just is sad to think that such a young child is picking up on these kind of things, and you can't even see the teacher's face. You can't see their smile. You can't see their facial expressions, which is awful. And there was actually a video that a mom made right in the middle of kind of all the craziness with the pandemic, and she was just asking the CDC. She was saying, hey, if you're experts, give us something better. If this really all you have, the guidelines of setting kids 6, you know, feet apart and all those things. She just said, well, we demand better. This can't be the only solution. And so we tried to repost that, and it got taken down from every, you know, just that kind of thing. And it's scary to think that concerned parents are being shut up. Absolutely, you know, muted.
Nurses are being shut up. I have to tell you, I mean, I actually quit my 16-year career as a labor and delivery nurse on the 4th of July on Independence Day. I worked my last shift because at the hospital I was working at, this was before we even knew we were moving here, but at the hospital I was working at, we were getting emails every day telling us that if we spoke out, if we had an opinion, if we said anything that was different or varied from what the hospital wanted us to be putting out as the message or the narrative that we were supposed to be following, that we would be terminated. So we didn't have a right to speak. If you want to stay employed at this hospital, you have no rights. If you do think you have rights, you'll be meeting with someone in HR and you will be terminated. It was very, very clear and very plain. And I literally felt convicted at that moment. I was like, you know what? I felt for like a year before that, I felt God leading me somewhere else. And I didn't really know where it was. I'm going to get all emotional saying that, but like, yeah. You just have to stand up for what's right. You cannot just let people run all over you.
What were the,
you know, you can't let the secrets stay a secret. Like there are things that the American public needs to know, and it's not fair that people are being silenced.
Yeah. And what were they telling you that, like, this is what the hospital is kind of putting out?
Yeah, so it wasn't that they actually, there was no clear vision of what they were putting out. We just knew what they were putting out. We knew that if we didn't stand on the side of, oh no, coronavirus is terrible, COVID is really bad, everyone is dying, their hospitals are inundated with patients. And the truth of the matter is, our hospital was empty. There were no patients filling beds. We were not wearing masks inside the hospital. We were wearing masks to get into the hospital. We were having our temperature checked, and then we'd walk around the corner, take our masks off. We weren't wearing masks unless we went into a patient's room. Like, it was so much lying to the public, to the point where all of our procedures were even shut down. We lost $16 million just in my little hospital, $16 million in a 2-month period because we shut down elective procedures. As soon as those procedures opened back up, yes, beds were filling, but that's normal because on a normal day, hospitals run at capacity. All those hospitals in New York City and in Michigan that were overflowing with COVID patients, it's probably true. They were probably overflowing. A couple of hotspots were, because on a normal day, those beds are full. On a normal day, they can't take one more patient because those ICU beds run at capacity. That's why they were full. No one's explaining that. And those are the kind of things we weren't allowed to speak out against. So we could encourage people to wear masks all day long on our Facebook feeds or on our social media. We could say, please wear a mask, it saves lives. We could talk about anything that would promote the narrative. But if it went against the narrative, if we tried to let someone think critically about the fact that, healthcare workers are essential, all of our children were going to daycares, not wearing masks, not socially distancing, life as normal at the daycares that were opened up everywhere. All daycares in the state of Colorado, for example, were wide open. Nobody was getting sick. Nobody was dying from COVID. But yet, if we were to point that out and let someone try to critically think their way through, oh, well, if all daycares are open, why couldn't schools be opened? Oh, because all of the teachers are going to die. Surely all of the teachers will die if it's a public school, but they don't die if it's a daycare. It just, none of it makes sense. And so if you pointed to anything that made someone think about it critically, you would be fired.
Yeah,
absolutely, like without a doubt. Or if we talked about PPE and the fact that the CDC has flip-flopped so many times on their stance, right? First it was droplet precautions, then it was aerosolization, aerosolizing procedures were the problem. They've gone back and forth. Masks don't work, masks do work. Then they had us, oh no, there's not enough PPE, the big fear of there's not enough PPE in America, which was ridiculous. There was plenty of PPE. Our hospitals were hoarding it. We literally had supply rooms stocked to the gills with PPE. And you know what we had to do? We had to go in every day, get our temperature checked, and go get a mask issued for our shift that we may or may not wear, but you'd have to go get a mask issued. You'd keep that one mask until it was soiled or dirty. That is not how masks were meant to be worn. We would have one N95 respirator. I've never even worn an N95 respirator in my entire nursing career because I never worked with any patients that needed me to wear one. But we were getting one of those issued every shift, and then you had to save it in your locker in a bag. Even if you used it, you saved it in a bag where all of that is spinning around in the bag, and then you're going to put it on your face. Like none of it made any logical sense. They were recycling and reusing one-time use PPE. That's the stuff. If we were to speak out about any of that, we were going to be terminated. Right. That was very clear. So I just couldn't do the lies anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the amount of propaganda that I have seen, I mean, just for me as a very young person who's starting to become a little bit more politically aware and aware of kind of the bigger picture of how politics works in this country and in the world, frankly, but seeing the amount of propaganda is frightening. I never thought that, we look at China, we see the propaganda that they put on their TVs and different stuff. It's like, this is everywhere. Every time you look at your phones, when you, for example, on Instagram, when you do the search button, the first two things that always pop up are the CDC and the WHO or something. It's two of those. And I remember clicking on the CDC one day, and the post that they had just put up said, if you see any misinformation on Instagram, immediately report it. And misinformation includes, you don't need to wear a mask, those kind of things. Right. So anything controversial to what they're teaching. And I reported that, pose, because it's just like, you know, they're playing this game. They're really trying to shut people up. And it was so crazy to, what you're saying is crazy to think that they're using the healthcare workers as almost pawns to take part of that narrative.
Just to perpetuate the narrative, just to put it out there, to make everybody afraid, you know. And the ones of us that, so I quit my job, so I was able to speak out and say, like, and I'm very vocal on social media about the lies that are being perpetuated. But then, you know, you'll have the occasional nurse that I used to work with, and for some reason, even though they're in the center of this, they're in the epicenter of the lies, they see it every day, they know it's ridiculous, but somehow they're so far left in their thinking and in their belief system that they perpetuate it still, even though they know it's a bold-faced lie to say that masks work, or that we're wearing them every day, or that we should all be terrified and afraid. Like, the hospitals, the reality is they know it, but they don't have that moral compass. Does that make sense? Like, they don't have that moral compass that says, like, for me, if I was a teacher in this environment and I was being forced to wear a mask every day against my will, I probably would just leave my job. And the same thing goes for the other side. If you're a teacher, for example, in the public school system, every teacher has a choice. Every human has a choice. You can choose to leave. If you're afraid to go to school or go to work every day at school because you're afraid of getting COVID-19, you shouldn't be at school anyway. Like, you should just not be at school. So you should be looking for another job. So that's, this whole thing is like, we all have choices. Just make a choice, but the children shouldn't be the ones suffering from that, you know?
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you say this, because, and also just encouraging as a nurse to be able to make the argument that it is illogical. All the things that they're pushing right and left, just, you know, take off the mask, wear the mask, do this, and so much controversy about it. And just to have somebody who has lived in that environment and understands that the science is just so bogus at this point. I mean, or not even, it's not science. It really is just peer pressure, and it's what they've decided they want to do. And you know, just seeing in the last debate, for example, you know, Biden will hold up the mask and say, if we just all wore one of these, all of our lives would be saved. And it just doesn't make sense. And I don't understand how people can get so behind the idea that at some point we'll have 0 deaths. It just doesn't happen. People.
Well, no, and honestly, they're not counting flu this year. So now they're not even counting. So they're all flu. I mean, and here's the thing that I said at the school board meeting that I think is really important for us, because there's a doctor on our school board. There's a doctor who completely thinks I'm ridiculous, and that how could I come out and say all this stuff? The science is split down the middle. So I know you've been through college, right? You graduated from college. You know that when you write a paper, whether it's a scientific paper or whatever your references are, you can prove any point you'd like to prove. There is going to be research that backs people that say we should all wear masks. There is research that backs people saying masks are actually more harmful than they are good. And so there are 2 sides of this. I know more doctors in my profession that would say, do not wear the mask, build up your immune system, unless you are somebody who's at risk, and in which case then you should be wearing an N95 fitted respirator or staying at home and not going out. So if you're someone afraid to get it or you're high risk, don't go anywhere, stay home. But for all the rest of us, we should be building up our immune system. And so I actually know more doctors that lean toward that side of the thinking and that side of the aisle that are great doctors, Harvard educated, Yale. I mean, these doctors are phenomenal doctors. They've been in practice for years and years and years, have huge practices, amazing people, and they're being called fake. They're being called fake science. So because there are 2 sides to science. It isn't just like a one-way street with this. We are split. And I brought that up. I said, you know, at the school board meeting, I said, scientists are split. Doctors, medical professionals, we're split down the middle in terms of what we believe will work and what won't work. And we can each bring 15 pieces of evidence to the table to show you why we are right. Each side can bring you the evidence to show you and drive it home as to why we're right. So as a society, as a community, as a school board, for example, how do we expect you to agree on something if we can't even agree on it. But the bigger issue isn't even that. The biggest issue I have with public schools here in Florida, and the school board in our county in particular, is that they are not voting and listening to what their constituents are saying. We, the people, voted them into those seats. There's only one person on the school board, and she's a woman, the only woman up there, who said, I'd like to hear from you. I need to hear from you guys, because the way I vote, I take everything into consideration, and I don't make that decision lightly, because I'm not here to make a decision for you. I'm here to represent you and pass the decision that you would like made. So if our big thing was, give us a survey all the teachers, not the teachers unions. I've been a part of nursing unions. The unions are horrible. They don't represent every teacher. Every teacher deserves a voice. Every parent deserves a voice. Every staff member at a school deserves a voice. All the bus drivers deserve voices, not as a union, but as an individual person in the United States of America. And so that was my thing, is I reminded them that they took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and they are not upholding that oath if they're sitting up there educating on us on why masks are good and why we should all wear them. That is their bias, and they are voting with their bias. They are not voting the way that the people have asked them to vote. They haven't even asked us, so how would they know how we'd like to vote? And so I think for me, that's the bigger issue right now in the public school system, is that the taxpayers are not getting a voice.
Well, it is the fundamental difference between the idea that government top-down experts to regular civilians should be able to control, and that just the same thing with the education, where they don't believe that parents are equipped to teach their own children or to raise their own children, because you have to look to the experts always. You need regulations, you need control, because people aren't smart, basically. People don't know how to make their own decisions, versus the total opposite, that, self-government, things like that. And so that's kind of where that split comes, of this kind of, expert control, or letting people decide what they want to do. Because me personally, I just think if we're walking around, and if I did a survey, I bet, in a mall, and asked people, did you just open up a new package for this mask today, or is this mask the same one you were wearing last month? If we were to ask people what's actually going on when, we have all these experts pushing and pushing the control of people to wear these masks every day for safety reasons, whereas they would probably be much better off if they actually took off the mask, because most people are going to reuse the same one. Just when it comes to the practicality of enforcing something like that, in a perfect world, we don't want anybody to be sick, but the reality of it is, you're right, we do have to build up our immune systems and just be logical about this. And I think a survey is a great way to bring that control down to the local level and let the people decide, what's going to work best for their community. And I think a lot of people are just afraid to speak out, afraid to say that this is ridiculous, and they feel that way. One-on-one conversations, almost everybody I've run into agrees that it's ridiculous. But when it comes into that work environment, people are scared. People don't want to quit their job. People want security, especially now. So it really is very difficult to get people to speak up like you have.
I think it's, the loudest voices are not always the majority. The loudest voices, in my experience, are actually the minority. They just happen to be the loudest. And so I think that is a big problem with, especially with the schools, is that a lot of the teachers might not participate in the union. You only have to have 50% to be considered, for the union to go ahead. And those that are not participating, even those that are participating, may not vote for, wearing masks all day at school every day. But their voice isn't heard, because the union has taken over that vote, and they're very, very loud. And so people are under the impression that the teachers are all sitting here terrified and afraid of dying of COVID, when the reality is the teachers I've spoken to, they're all like, I just wish we could get rid of masks, or at least have it be an option. If parents want their kids to wear one, fine. If I could choose to wear one, I won't. But, I'd like it to be a choice and not a mandate, so to speak.